Mer. Hey y'all, it's me again. I'm gonna continue reading from my book, The 1900s, as long as my cat will let me, as you can see in the corner here. He loves me. Lay down, Tractor. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna continue reading from my book. Okay. Chapter 9. Sarah Childress Polk. September 4th, 1803 to August 14th, 1891. Married January 1st, 1824. Oh, on New Year's Day. Nice. Presidential husband, James K. Polk. One of the least well-known presidents. Hey. Children, none. First lady from 1845 to 1849. So a couple of good years. Astrological sign, Virgo. Like me! I'm a Virgo too. Yay! Religion, Presbyterian. I'm just a normal Christian. Soundbite. The dance in the White House would be respectful neither to the house nor to the office. With no children to look after, Sarah Childress Polk was free to devote her extraordinary mind and energies to the career of her husband, James Knox Polk. It was an arrangement that suited them both perfectly. Until James worked himself to death, leaving Sarah decades with little more to do than miss him. Like how I would. Just like how I would be with my boyfriend. Sarah was born the third of 6 children near Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I am actually the firstborn in my family. Anyways, her father, Joel Childress, succeeded at everything from plantation owner to tavern keep, acquiring large enough fortune to send Sarah to some of the finest schools in the country. Her liberal education gave Sarah a love of reading and conversation lasted a lifetime and earned the respect of all who encountered her. I love to read too, as you can tell by my YouTube. Anyways, her keenest admirer was a stern little fellow named James Polk, who met Sarah in 1820. She eventually accepted his proposal of marriage, but significantly on one condition, that he make something of himself by winning a seat in the Tennessee legislature. He soon did, and the two were married, cementing a partnership and in politics that would take them all the way to the White House. James was all business, a tight-lipped man who liked almost nothing except working hard and getting ahead. He stammered through conversations that were anything but politics and lacked the social graces that earned so many of the great men of the age a place in history. Thankfully, his wife made up for all that. In addition to being just as dedicated and organized as James, Sarah was charming, elegant, and witty. She had a gift for intelligent gab, adorned herself in finding that was beautiful without being showy, and stuck piously to the strictures of her Presbyterian faith. Such qualities allowed her to get away with much that normally would have been considered unladylike for the age. She preferred the company of men. For instance, eschewing the fluffy chit-chat of her fellow women for the heady talk of the men's parlor. Though she typically sided with her husband on major issues, she was not afraid to disagree with him, even in public. It wasn't long before Sarah became just as popular in powerful circles as her husband, helping James win a seat in the United States House of Representatives, where he eventually became Speaker, and a term as Governor of Tennessee. Sarah Polk did a terrific job of managing her husband's finances. Of course, slave labor made the task a simple one. With the support of giants like former President Andrew Jackson, James won the Democratic Party's presidential nomination in 1844. But Mrs. Polk, whose organizational and social skills did much to her husband where he was, had begun to attract their rancor some, especially women, who thought she was spending too much time debating and not enough time in the kitchen. Sarah brushed them off with a feisty with a feisty retort. If I get to the White House, I expect to live on $25,000 a year, and I will neither keep house nor make butter. Stick that in your bread oven. She was way ahead of her time. But I guess the first lady that we have now would think more like Sarah Polk. But we have the first lady that we have. Oh well. The intrepid Sarah did indeed make it to the White House, and she was true to her word. The new first lady distanced herself from a whimsical and prolific gay predecessor, Julia Tyler, by entertaining often and tastefully, entirely within the president's salary. Indeed, she managed to squirrel away a fair amount of it away for retirement, and she steered clear of the kitchen, spending much of her time gleaning newspapers and reading speeches for her husband, who often relied on her as a private secretary. In fact, as the spouse of a president who rarely consulted his cabinet, Sarah was the second most important figure in the administration, as James himself later admitted. None but Sarah knew so intimately my private affairs. The First Lady actively championed the administration's expansionist policies, held lavish dinners to win support for the war against Mexico, and never missed church on Sunday. James, though a Methodist, acquiesced to being dragged to his wife's Presbyterian services. James had promised from the beginning that he would seek only one term as president. It was a good thing, too. No president ever slaved so hard at the job. After surrendering the White House to Zachary Taylor, he and Sarah retired to Nashville. There, having exhausted himself with 4 years of relentless effort, James died in 1849. Tragically, Sunday and Sarah died with him. The man to whom she had been wife, partner, friend, counselor, and secretary was gone. She had been the fuel beneath his rising star, and no first lady before her had exercised such direct influence. For the next 42 years, she did virtually nothing. Secluded within the home that she converted to a temple to her husband, she never ventured out except to attend church. During the Civil War, she continued to be an absentee and landlord to a piece of her late husband's Mississippi property, declared her neutrality, entertained officers from both the North and the South, and eventually sought comfort in the care of her grandniece. She died in 1891. Though a pension granted to her by Congress helped ease her final years a bit, the money could probably have been put to better use somewhere else. The fact is, Sarah Polk never really needed any help from anyone. Like me. I don't really need any help from anybody. Except for on the stay for now until I get my own fucking job. Which, by the way, is the reason why I'm dressed so nice today. It's because I have a job review today. Yay! Wish me the best of luck. I've been trying to find a job for 2 years now. Still nothing, as you can tell. Please help. Just kidding. Sahara Sarah. Sarah Polk took her Presbyterian faith very seriously. Church attendance on Sundays was mandatory. Those impish souls who made the mistake of calling on the first couple on the Sabbath were promptly invited to join the Polks at church. Indeed, one hapless Austrian minister who came to the White House on Sunday intended to present his credentials and simply turned away. But Sarah's spirituality wasn't reserved for only one day of the week. While First Lady, she forbade dancing and card playing and needs Zooks and match at all times. Her reputation preceded her. At the inaugural ball for her husband, the band stopped playing as soon as the Polks entered the room. They struck up again after the new president and his wife left. In truth, Sarah loved gathering people by the piano, but only to sing hymns. The thing that really rankled Washingtonians, however, was Sarah's ban on hard liquor. Those politicians and socialites who'd been accustomed to during White House events by going down whiskey spiked punch had only glasses of wine against us through the hours of tedious small talk and insincerities. It wasn't long before the mistress of such a dry house became widely known as Sahara Sarah. Huh! Love that name. The cheapest labor of all. Sarah's choice to ban hard liquor at the White House was an expensive one. After all, whiskey at the time was cheap. Wine wasn't. All the more reason to be impressed by her stewardship of the mansion's resources brought her well under the Pope's $25,000 salary. Had she managed to make ends meet? In a word, slaves. Most of the White House duties during the Polk administration were performed by African slaves who, we need not point out, were in the habit of lining up for a paycheck at the end of the month. Sarah's views on what many call the hated institution were alarmingly straightforward. The one thing she had in common with her predecessor, Julia Tyler. The writers of the Declaration of Independence were mistaken when they affirmed that all men are created equal. She once pointed out to us, there are those men toiling in the heat of the sun while you are right, and I am sitting here fanning myself in this house as airy and delightful as a palace, surrounded with every comfort. Those men who did not choose such a lot in life, neither did we ask for ours. We are created for these places. One wonders how eager she would have been to express her opinion had one of those men been present to contest her theory. Chapter 10. Margaret Taylor. September 21st, 1788 through August 18th, 1852. Married June 21st, 1810. Residential husband, Zachary Taylor. Children, Anne Margaret Mackall, Sarah Knox, Octavia Pannell, Margaret Smith, Mary Elizabeth, and Richard, the only boy. First lady from 1849 through 1850 for one whole fucking year. Astrological sign, Virgo. Another Virgo, nice. Religion, Episcopalian. I say how she say. I don't know. Soundbite. A plot to deprive me of his society and shorten his life by unnecessary care and responsibility, referring to her husband's nomination for president by the Whig Party. As her husband campaigned to be president, Margaret Taylor prayed every night for his defeat. The powers that be weren't listening. Oops. No accurate portrait has survived of Margaret Mackall Smith Taylor. We can imagine, however, what her face would have looked like. Careworn and streaked with wrinkles from years of life as an army bride and from worrying over her husband's presidency, which she dreaded far more than any of the frontier hazards that shaped her character and outlook on life. There was nothing in Margaret's upbringing to indicate that she was destined for a life of military postage in the wilds of America. Born in Calvert County, Maryland, she was the daughter of Anne Mackall and Walter Smith, a former officer in the Revolution whose plantation wealth bought him access to the elite society of the slave-owning East. In 1809, she met Zachary Taylor, an officer in the Army. By 1810, he was a captain and they were married. Zachary was also from a good family and was given over 300 acres of prime Kentucky land from his father as a wedding present. The newlyweds had every reason to expect an easy life together. But while Taylor was an officer, he hadn't gone to West Point and couldn't expect to merely shoot up through the ranks. In fact, for the next 40 years or so, he was at the whim of superior officers who had a hell of a lot of territory to patrol. As a result, he and Margaret moved from one remote place on the frontier to another, racking up hundreds of miles of travel through the fringes of a vast country. What the fucking hell? Look at how my cat is sitting. Why the hell is he sitting like this? Can you tell me why? He's sitting like this. Well, I can't speak weird sometimes. Sorry. I'm gonna continue. From the forts of Minnesota to swamps of Florida, the Taylors became experts at roughing it in style. In crowded tents and ramshackle cabins, Margaret raised her children, saw to her husband's needs, and learned how to use Zachary's command. And how to use a gun, and still found time to make life a little easier for the enlisted men under Zachary's command. In 1820, Fever claimed 2 young daughters, but Margaret, long since acclaimed to the dangerous world into which she had married, merely kept on trucking. The surviving children, when they were of sufficient age, were sent east for their schooling. And Margaret continued to draw on her innate strength of character to get her through the separations and the lack of amenities. In 1840, Zach was stationed in Baton Rouge, and Margaret turned their new digs, a mansion that once housed Spanish aristocrats, into the sort of home they'd never been able to enjoy. It was like a reward for all the hardships they'd been through. The relative domestic bliss came to an end in 1845, however, when Zach was ordered to the front in the war with Mexico. Margaret was furious at the prospect of losing his company, but she had no idea just how great it cost the war with Zach. Zachary survived, but became a national hero. Now Margaret would have to share him with the entire United States, called Old Rough and Ready for his willingness to share in his men's hardships. General Taylor was as apolitical as he was a hard-fighting soldier, but that didn't stop the Whig Party from wooing him for a presidential line. He answered the call to duty and took the Whigs up on their offer. Margaret was crushed. After keeping her peace through decades of discomfort, she had finally had enough. She wanted to spend her waning years with her husband in retirement she believed he had earned. To her, a presidential term was like a death sentence, sure to squeeze the last bit of life out of the old soldier she loved and stood by since 1810. She prayed every night for his defeat in the 1848 election. The powers that be weren't listening. Old Rough and Ready became the next president of the United States, and Margaret quietly prepared herself for the next, as it would turn out, final sacrifice on behalf of her country. To ease the frustration she felt as having lost her husband to executive branch, she attended church. Every day, apparently the Almighty's inability to arrange a Taylor defeat in 1848 had spoiled his relationship with the new First Lady. Besides this, she did very little. Virtually all hosting responsibilities were turned over to 25-year-old daughter Betty, while Margaret busied herself with needlework and the occasional social visit. Few First Ladies have ever been so reluctant to embrace the role. During the presidential campaign, Taylor's opponents portrayed his wife as a sort of mid-19th century version of white trash. A pipe-smoking, firewood-stacking, uncouth little frontier troll who had no right being the spouse of a national leader. The truth couldn't have been further from the image. Margaret was an Eastern lady, born and bred, a well-heeled woman who spent nearly as much time in urban settings such as Philadelphia and New York as she had within bowshot of hostile Native Americans. But her self-imposed anonymity in the White House did nothing to correct the public myth. It didn't help that her better half had her dressing like a refugee and spat tobacco juice all over the executive mansion as if he were still campaigning Seminoles in the Florida backcountry. Those wondering what real frontier behavior looked like needed to look no further than the president himself. 40 long years of trudging behind her soldier husband was starting to take its toll. Margaret had been prone to sickness long before becoming First Lady, and she seemed to get only worse with time. But exactly that everyone should have been worried about. On July 4th, 1850, President Taylor attended a bout of long-winded public presentations to celebrate the nation's birth. Exhausted by the oppressive heat, he retired to the White House, where he washed down a bowl of cherries with iced milk. He soon became sicker than a dog. On July 9th, he died. Margaret, imploding with grief, had to be literally torn from her husband's corpse while she wailed about the quickness of his passing and the horrible fact that they not exchanged any final sentiments before the end. Her grisly prediction of presidential tragedy had come true. Numbed by the catastrophe, Margaret packed up and left the capital with little fanfare. She spent most of her final 2 years of life in Mississippi with Betty, the daughter who'd been her surrogate first lady. When she died in 1852, any hope that the nation and prosperity had to get to know her better died with her. Wow. Please rate, comment, and subscribe down below. And if you're on YouTube, please ring that bell notification so that you know when I upload. And if you're on TikTok, please like and follow my videos. And if you're on and if you want my username for eBay and Mercari, please comment down below because I don't want to give that out because I'm trying to keep everything sacred as much as possible. Okay? Well, bye!